The state of Georgia has reverted back to the Jim Crow era. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Marquita Show podcast, a podcast where I talk about everything from politics to pop culture and everything in between. And if you are not subscribed, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button. Don't forget, turn on that bell for post notifications so you get notified every single time I post and or go live. Also, one last thing, please follow me on my social media. My links will be down below, especially TikTok, because we have quite a bit of fun over there, and I don't want you guys to miss it, so go follow me ASAP. So today's video is going to be about the recent voter bill that passed in Georgia that has everybody upset, especially Miss Stacey Abrams, who I'm going to play a clip from shortly, and she's going to tell you what this bill means to her. Lovely Miss Abrams. So if you did not know, there are several articles talking about the new bill in Georgia that kind of, I wouldn't say it did an overhaul of the voter laws in Georgia, but it did clean up a little bit. In case you didn't know, the runoff election as well as the 2020 presidential election had a lot of people in Georgia upset, especially on the right. More so upset because they felt like the election was, I can't say that word on YouTube. Almost got me. They felt like there were some irregularities going on. So in order to restore that faith in our system, I think Governor Kemp wanted to do a little bit of security measures to clean up our elections, which it has been needed all along. It's just that the 2020 election just brought everything to the forefront. So that's been going on. There's a lot of groups calling out, oh, it's voter suppression. Oh, it's, you know what, the R word. It's Jim Crow 2.0. But I want to start by playing a clip from Stacey Abrams herself. She is not my favorite person, y'all. I'm just going to be real. She is not my favorite person. She lost in Georgia, the governor's race, and she's been like irking me ever since. She won't go away. I've never seen somebody not lose gracefully. Get it together, girl. Okay, so I'm going to play this clip. It's from CNN. It's an interview she did talking about the new law that's going on in Georgia. So as always, let's roll the video.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer in D.C., he called this effort by Georgia Republicans, quote, racist, plain and simple, unquote. Do you agree? And is there any way for Democrats to stop these efforts?
Well, first of all, I do absolutely agree that it's racist. It is a redux of Jim Crow in a suit and tie. We know that the only thing that precipitated these changes, it's not that there was a question of security. In fact, the Secretary of State and the governor went to great pains to assure America that Georgia's elections were secure. And so the only connection that we can find is that more people of color voted, and it changed the outcome of elections in a direction that Republicans do not like.
Okay, so you just watched Stacey Abrams call this apparent new legislation Jim Crow, basically Jim Crow 2.0. I do not agree with that. I read through the bill itself, and in the first few pages, it just talks about what went on during the election and what made them be concerned about some voter irregularities that went on that may need to be corrected, and a lot of it was with cause. There's a lot of stuff that is worrisome, and it leaves a lot of gaps for people to quote unquote cheat. Now, I think Kemp was quoted as saying, which is the best description of what this bill is making it easy to vote and hard to cheat. That was the objective of this bill, and I think they came close as possible to achieving that goal. In no way do I feel like it's Jim Crow. Now, there was an article in Business Insider that I am going to go through because they broke down the changes well, layman terms, we can understand. Because all we hear from the left is that it's voter suppression. But they're not actually identifying anything specific in the bill. They're saying, oh, voter ID. Well, requiring voter ID is nothing new in Georgia, actually, because to vote in person, you have to show ID. So now requiring it as far as a mail-in ballot goes, there's nothing new, because if you went in person, you'd have to show your ID. So There's really nothing new there. But there's a whole lot of claims that have been made by the left as to why it's racist, why it's voter suppression. Again, it's the voter ID. It's the not allowing people to be getting food in line, food or water while they're waiting in line. It's the eliminating Sundays and weekend voting, which is not true actually. The organizations, they put restrictions on third-party organizations that mail out these mass requests for ballots. That was confusing to a lot of election officials. They were getting duplicate requests for ballots. People were thinking that they were actually from the government, and they actually in turn weren't. But before I get all into that, let's go ahead and pull up this article from Business Insider. Okay, so this is the article from Business Insider. It's titled, What Georgia's Controversial New Election Law Means for Voters, Election Officials, and Outside Groups. So with that being said, the legislation actually targets voters. It also targets election officials, and it also targets outside groups, which applies to Stacey Abrams and her Fair Fight party, who I felt did a lot of interesting, to say the least, stuff during the 2020 election. So we're gonna start with what affects voters, because that was the biggest issue, that it's voter suppression, and it's gonna change and do all this kind of crazy mess to keep black people from voting, which I completely do not agree with. So let's go ahead. It says changes for voters. It says many counties will see expansion in early voting dates. What I saw, and I'm just going to do a brief overview because I read through this early, is and try to debunk some of the myths that are going on. One of them was that they were going to get rid of Sunday voting. That is absolutely, positively not true. They're just not requiring Sunday voting. It is optional, and they are limited to 2 days. And then there's also weekend or Saturday voting. A lot of counties did not offer that at all. That was a luxury in a lot of counties. But this mandates, I think, 2 weekends of early voting. Now, the date for early voting cuts off. That's just to give the election officials time to tabulate all of those votes. Well, not tabulate, but collect and make any corrections before the actual election. And it gives them time to process. That was the big deal during the election. They had so many requests and so many to process that it was very overwhelming. So this gives them enough time to process. They have to be in, I think, before 11 days prior to the election. So that gives them enough time to process. I don't think that's voter suppression because you shorten the time. No, that gives us enough time to correct any mistakes that are going on. So I don't know how that was voter suppression because they shortened the time. That just means you have to, it's early voting. You have to do it early. Come on now. It's not hard. It's not hard to understand. Then the Sunday voting thing, I think they said it targeted black people or minorities because they did souls to the poll. You have 6 other days. And like I said, in some counties, they don't even offer weekend voting at all. So this is what they were trying to do. They were trying to regulate so everybody statewide had the same opportunity and the same amount of time to vote. So nobody would be disenfranchised, because technically the people that were in counties that didn't have Sunday or weekend voting, they were disenfranchised. Because what if they worked? So now this opens up a whole nother sector to people that may have been excluded in those counties. So I don't know how that's voter suppression when now more people are going to have the opportunity to vote because it's mandated. Moving on, let's attack the actual voter ID. Now, in Georgia, you have to show ID if you go in person. If you do the absentee, they just do signature matches. They match your signature to something that was on file, that was previously on file. What they're doing now, instead of signing the outside of the ballot, you're going to put your state-issued or voter ID number. They're going to compare it to make sure you're registered to vote. So my thing is asking for ID is not too much. Most people in 2021 have an ID. Now, here's the kicker. Who doesn't have an ID, or the largest group that may potentially not have an ID, who I felt like Stacey Abrams capitalized on, that's the homeless. Because there was a lot of suspicion around homeless people voting and multiple people using the same address. So I think that's going to kind of combat that. Not saying that homeless shouldn't vote, but most homeless people probably have an ID as well. Because in this day and age, it's hard to do anything without an ID. And then, here's the kicker, guys. I used to work for the Department of Driver Services. That's what it's called in Georgia. Other people know it as the DMV. In Georgia, we have it separate. We have car and we have license. So DDS is my previous employer. We offered free ID, voter ID card. So it's not disenfranchising people when something that you're required to have is free. But as always, the left wants to paint a certain picture. They want to run with a certain narrative, so they're not going to tell you that. If you don't have a voter ID, the driver's license office will offer you one free of charge. So no one is disenfranchised by this. So be careful, guys. Remember. Next down, it says legislators shorten the window. Okay, we talked about that. It says ballot drop boxes. Oh, this is a fun one because they love this one because they're saying this is discrimination because now black people don't have access. I guess they don't have cars, but they were saying they were doing away with the drop boxes. Now, the drop boxes were a temporary provision due to coronavirus, due to people not wanting to gather in groups. They had these drop boxes. Technically, that was illegal. That is not in Georgia's constitution. You are not allowed to do that. But guess what? This legislation made the drop box legal. So they were saying they were taking them, but this legislation actually made them legal. But they're not going to share that with you. They're going to say, oh no, they're taking up the number of drop boxes. Well, they're not going to put out as many because we have a vaccine. And Georgia, for the most part, is open. And the whole country is pretty much opening up now because we have a vaccine. So there's a less need for as many drop boxes when people are going out. So less absentee ballots, right? So again, they're pushing a narrative. They're saying they're taking up drop boxes. No, they made it legal. They're not going to have as many is because the pandemic, it looks like we rounded the curve and the country's opened up. We don't see a need for it. We don't see a need for it. So again, be careful. They're trying to push a certain narrative. The runoffs, they addressed the runoffs. Our runoff seemed like it went forever. We constantly got bombarded with flyers, with mail, with text messages. And it was a lot for people. And so they've shortened it, which I think is wonderful. That is just way too long. And basically it comes down to who has the most money. Who has enough money to, you ran in the general, then you have to do a runoff. That's more money. So basically it comes down who has the longest money. So that kind of eliminates that. I don't think that because you're financially successful, you beat somebody. You should beat somebody on merits, not finances, if that makes sense. So strolling down, it says ballot selfies banned. That's a new one. I think I grazed over these last couple earlier, but ballot selfies, so you can't take pictures, which is fine. It says the state will set up a voter intimidation hotline. I think that goes hand in hand with the other thing, which is the no giving food or water to people standing in line. That one's a kind of weird one, but I can kind of see where they went with it. But it was a little unnecessary. But I guess they felt like that if you're gonna, it kind of is, I guess. It's kind of like bribery. It's like, okay, we'll give you this, we'll give you that, stay in line. But I think they did allow for election officials to provide water. But what I do like is that it does address the underlying issue. If you're standing in a line so long that you become hungry and thirsty, you need to address the problem. Why are you waiting so long? Shouldn't it be on the board of electors or the election officials to make sure they have enough precincts so that people are not waiting in line for 4 and 5 hours. Like, that addresses a better issue than coming out here giving people water and food because they've been here for a long time. Why have they been here for a long time? Let's address that issue. And they do. They require local officials to open up more precincts if they're having issues like this, because we all know that Atlanta is notorious for having long wait lines for voting. So again, that actually helps the voter in turn by creating a quicker process, therefore people not getting deterred easily. So yeah, a lot of this stuff is just false information people are putting out, and you are more than welcome. I'll try to find the link again to the actual bill itself. It is 98 pages. You are more than welcome to read it in your leisure. I got through a few pages, but again, I don't have the time to sit down and read 98 pages in one sitting. So I just read through a couple pages, tried to get the gist of it. I'll probably go back and read more, but I will, if I can find it, I'll link it in the description box along with this article that kind of breaks it down. I'm just going bullet point by bullet point and kind of summing up what it's saying in the paragraph, but I'll link this so you guys can read it more in depth, because I believe it gives an honest opinion, not a biased opinion, because right now, we're getting an unbiased opinion from the left, who we all know always, they're not the most honest people. They're pushing agenda. They're telling people it's voter suppression without even explaining what in the bill is voter suppression. Because if they actually read the bill, it helps out a lot of people. It gives more people access to voting. Again, the motto was easy to vote, hard to cheat. That is the motto. That is the theme throughout this. And I feel like they did as best of a job as they could with doing that. Then it goes down to talk about election officials. I think they create a board. This more so doesn't impact the voter themselves, because the left is pushing that it attacks the voter itself. So I just really didn't. I'm gonna be honest. I kind of skimmed over that, but again, I'll link this article. They also talked about organizations, because as we know, in the 2020 election, third-party organizations were involved heavily. I know you probably got as much as I got. I got stacks and stacks and stacks from third-party organizations that we couldn't figure out if they were from the government. Come to find out, they were not from the government. We thought they were, but they were applications for absentee ballots. So organizations were mass sending these things out with wrong addresses, wrong information. Some of these things, well, not some, a lot of these things have wrong information on it. And so the election officials were getting duplicates and multiples, and that kind of backed up things. So what they did was they told them that they cannot send out duplicates, meaning that if the person already voted, you can't send out another one. Like, because I know I got 10 of them, at least, more like 20 from different organizations. I got a couple from like multiple from one particular organization, and I think it's called Black Pack. I'm not sure, but I'm almost like, I know I got some from them, but I think they sent me like 5 or 6 of them. And at first, people were thinking that they were actually from the government, but if you look at the addresses, it's not from the state election board. So we were confused. I was like, that doesn't look legit. And in the beginning, my dad, he got one. I think he was the first person that got one, and he was like, is this legit? He was like, I'm not putting my information on that. But then he got another one. I got one with my information already filled in, and all I had to do was pretty much sign it, and they would send me a ballot. So it's securing that up, because let's be real, a lot of people on the right lost faith in our election system after the 2020 presidential race. I can't be mad at people, and people didn't in turn show up. So the Republicans, they had to come out and do something, and I think they were as fair as possible. The only one that I have a problem with was the food and drink thing. I just really didn't understand that one. But you know, it's cool, not really. But the other stuff really did make sense. We needed to secure up some things and restore that faith in our election system. It was apparent with the runoff, because I really believe if Republicans had showed up like they did for Trump, for Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue. Sorry, I'm talking like we on a first name basis. But if we had shown up for Trump, showed up for them like we did Trump, it would have been a different outcome. Because I think statistics said that, like, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of Republicans stayed home because they felt like they were cheated out of the general election. So hopefully this bill will restore faith, but only time will tell. Only the next election will show. And I know there's a lot of protests going on saying we should boycott this, but I feel like if people really looked at it, it helps everybody. It just doesn't help one side. It just reassures. And if I were you, I would encourage people to just read the bill or find a non-biased source and check it out and read it for yourselves and see what the actual bill does. It does not eliminate drop boxes. It does not eliminate Sunday voting. Requiring voter ID is not voter suppression because we've been showing ID in person for I don't know how long. So all of this stuff is just being hyped up by the left. So people, just think for yourself. Moral of the story, just think for yourself. Get out. I just Googled and I came up with this article. Share this article with a friend because I feel like they're trying to bring a federal case against this bill, and I see nothing wrong with it. If you read it, you'll know what's going on. I'm not saying it's a perfect bill, but if you read it, it does some good stuff and it shores up a lot of stuff. They were upset, like I said, they were upset about the drop boxes, but it made it permanent. Like, all states are going to do weekend voting. A lot of counties didn't even have that. So they were being disenfranchised, honestly, without being offered that. So now everybody gets a part of that. Everybody gets the option to have weekend voting. Sunday voting was not eliminated. It's just optional now, and you're limited to 2. So anyway, as always, guys, I want to know your take on what's going on in Georgia. In case you didn't know, I live in Georgia, so this will affect me. And as a Georgia voter, I see nothing wrong with this. But I know there's people that have problems with it. Do you believe that this is an attempt of the right of voter suppression? Do you feel like it is the R word? Just your overall feel for the bill. Do you agree? You don't have to live in Georgia. Take the time to read it, though. Don't just answer blindly or just based on what you saw. Do you believe it is voter suppression? What do you think will become of it? Just anything you feel, leave it down in the comments below. I will be down there with you guys, chatting it up. And as always, you know what I'm about to say. I don't know why. Who gets shocked at what I'm about to say at the end? But anyway, as always, one vibe, one tribe. Deuces.